Coming up on this week's RegCast.
For one thing, we're not doing such a great job on market surveillance or AML and KYC or transaction monitoring for just regular banking for TradFi. So last year we had the big HSBC and NatWest fines here in the UK, and both of those were around systems and control failures. They have the fancy monitoring, but they couldn't calibrate it correctly.
At the moment, good doesn't look very good. So that's the challenge for a start. So at the moment, you've got compliance practices, even for a fairly straightforward question around, particularly in a cross-border context or with a particular asset type or a structured product or something, you're looking at an onerous compliance process that sits off the back of that. Putting that into a digital format means that this gateway is crossed in seconds. It's a click of a button.
10 years ago, the RegTech conversation was, how do we implement MiFID II? Or how are we going to implement MiFID II? Right now, it's so far beyond that, it's not even funny. We have so many balls up in the air. Everything's changing. How do you lock it down? Start thinking about the way you manage that change as part of business as usual, so that when the regulators finally get ready to change the rules again, which they are, or getting there, it's not going to be such a shock, because you're not going to have enough time to make some of these changes. We never do.
Welcome to RegCast.
RegCast. Shining a light on challenges and opportunities for digital compliance.
Hi, I'm PJ, CEO and founder of JWG, and welcome back to RegCast. This is episode 6, where we're taking a look at the economic crime space and really digging into what's happening with this agenda. In advance of our conference, which is coming up on the 23rd of June, we are recording this in mid-May. Just as by way of introduction, we're really starting to dig into what's happening with the rule base in conjunction with what's happened to all of the collaboration across the industry. And ultimately, this is all being shaped by expectations for what's happening in the markets. And as we know, we're really at a tipping point for the markets with a lot of new types of activity that are bringing unknown levels of risk. So we have things like DAOs, the Decentralized Autonomous Organizations. We have lots of new transactions like property being conducted in Bitcoin. We have sanctions in place because of what's going on in Europe right now. So ultimately, there are a number of obligations that are starting to enter a very digitalized space, and these rule sets are moving fast. They may not seem like it, but under the covers, they have been moving for quite a while. And we're at a real interesting point where a lot of great lessons have been learned from experiments in the RegTech space that a lot of the community's been pushing for the last few years. And a lot of demand from the market itself, both the TradFi and the digital asset providers. Now, all of this requires a lot of vision, because we can't really put our hands and arms around this market that we're creating right now without understanding what the target architecture is all about. So that's where we're talking about with the market experts on the 23rd of June. And I'm really pleased to have two of the preeminent experts on RegTech with us here today. Rachel, can you please introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Rachel Wolcott. I'm a senior editor at Regulatory Intelligence, which is part of Thomson Reuters.
Thanks very much. Alan.
Thanks, PJ. My name's Alan Blanchard. I'm working for APX, a Swiss RegTech founded in 2017. I joined them in 2019, and before that, I was working for the FCA, publishing the Handbook of Rules there for about 5 years.
Well, it's great to have you both. And I think the big question, the one people are most interested in right now, is what do we have to do to future-proof RegTech in this economic crime space? And Alan, I guess I wanted to start with you on that one. How has the new technology made TradFi and digital asset firms capable of being ready for change in a sort of business as usual mode?
Yeah, very nice question. So I think I don't think we need to future-proof RegTech is the first thing to say. I think RegTech is the future. Obviously, I wouldn't join a RegTech firm without thinking that. But we've seen this journey evolve over the last 5 or 6 years, from PDFs on a website and how do we comply with those rules, all the way through to rules as code, machine readable rules, looking much more like a future event, or something that's fit for the digital age, let's say. But this is coming from a very analog background. So regulatory change management being very human-centered, traditionally spreadsheet-based. So it's quite the leap we've made in the last 5 or 6 years to get away from these old practices into deploying technologies like natural language processing, object character recognition, web crawlers, and all the rest of it. This is really driving the ability to track, consume, and implement regulatory change in a much more automated way, which then makes it fit for purpose for TradFi, DeFi, all these latest technologies that are sort of going to have to plug these technologies in at some point. And that's where the kind of implementation side is still a bit of a challenge. And this chasm, I think, is crossed with API. So the ability for different parts of the process to talk to each other and exchange information. This allows all regulatory changes, conceivably, to be delivered in real time directly into any system or process, whether that's on someone's desktop or on a blockchain, doesn't really matter. So I think the BAU that you're talking about is concentrating on the business activities that are required, so whether that's placing digital assets, trading digital assets, selling Bitcoin, whatever it is. But those activities now have regulatory change management delivered straight into them, and not the other way around. We're not sort of waiting for these activities. We're not waiting for the reg change to sort of be manually entered into these activities. The digital version of these rules is already there and can be plugged in straight away.
So as I'm listening to you describe it, it's the business activity being smart enough to call upon the oracle or whatever you call the thing that makes the decisions and say, hey, am I able to do this thing? Or how do I need to do this thing? Is that
exactly. So what are the guide rails? What's my wiggle room? Is it completely prescriptive? Is it open to interpretation? This might be where you bring in other experts. You might partner with law firms. You might have your legal advisors writing their legal advice directly on the technology that you've used to deploy these rule sets. But yes, ultimately, you're going to have a very short answer at the start of the process, rather than getting it wrong midway through and trying to clean it up afterwards.
Yeah, and I think you hinted at early there that that's really, maybe there's a bit of automation in the way that's done today with a spreadsheet or a PowerPoint document or something of that ilk. But really what needs to happen is that decision making needs to get truly digital.
Yeah, exactly.
What does it mean for for the business, for compliance that's checking the business? How do those rule sets becoming digital change the way they think about what good looks like?
At the moment, good doesn't look very good. So that's the challenge for a start. So at the moment, you've got compliance practices, even for a fairly straightforward question around, particularly in a cross-border context or with a particular asset type or a structured product or something, you're looking at an onerous compliance process that sits off the back of that. Putting that into a digital format means that this gateway is crossed in seconds. It's a click of a button. So this is the kind of transformation that's possible.
So Rachel, you've been looking at not only digital assets, but lots of compliance challenges across the board with the existing system for quite a while. How are you picking up the need for RegTech today, and what does it need to do to help the industry future-proof?
Well, I think in terms of the RegTech applications we have now for AML and KYC or market surveillance, one of the things that people need to do is make sure that they're using their existing technology properly and effectively before they go rushing off into digital assets. Because for one thing, we're not doing such a great job on market surveillance or AML and KYC or transaction monitoring for just regular banking for TradFi. So last year we had the big HSBC and NatWest fines here in the UK, and both of those were around systems and control failures. They have the fancy monitoring, but they couldn't calibrate it correctly to pick up and on the transactions that it needed to be flagged. And they also, their people systems behind that in terms of listening to their colleagues and understanding when problems were occurring were also notably absent. In terms of market abuse, insider dealing, I took a look at the SEC website this morning, and last year there were around 18, this is only by the SEC in the United States, 18 enforcement cases around insider dealing and market manipulation. And there were a couple of other things in there that were interesting. Failure to report suspicious transactions. There were two of those. And record keeping failures that cost JP Morgan 125 million, and because they weren't recording WhatsApp conversations. And there were a couple of other brokers who were done for things like inadequate risk management. So that tells me that we're not using the technology we have now to its maximum. In terms of looking forward, so you need to be doing some kind of audit of what kind of questions you're asking your systems, what kind of patterns you're looking for, what the sensitivities are. And this is, if you read the enforcement notices on HSBC and NatWest from the Financial Conduct Authority, you'll see some of these challenges and how many years it took for these companies to figure it out. So I think I would start there, have a good look, because there's a lot of similarities. Like, am I turning off alerts because I'm getting too many of them? How do I know what kind of alerts I should be following up? And what's my reaction to following the basic rules of reviewing customer accounts and doing investigations? These are all kind of bread and butter things that people need to be doing, because the digital assets, whether that's doing cryptocurrency trading or tokenized equities, is going to bring a whole new raft of challenges. You're not going to be able to just put your existing RegTech onto these new assets, because they're going to be trading differently. They're going to be doing different things. You're going to have to think about where you're getting your data. What does like anonymous trading look like in tokenized equities? I have no idea. I think there's a lot of things that need to be discussed, and also there has to be an awareness that in a lot of the enforcement actions we see, when you're introducing new products into a system, that's when new problems occur. I mean, this has happened in MiFID transaction reporting, for example. The firm will start trading a new product, but they won't update their system to capture that product and make sure that that product is being reported.
So there's a lot. So there's a lot there. I guess just that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I could go on and on. I mean, you're going to have to be trade reporting, equity, digital equity, right? I mean,
but in terms of before we get into the esoteric products, I think what I hear you saying is a really fundamental point, which is, you've got the experience from taking automated to somewhat digital today, and that hasn't necessarily gone that well. So there's important lessons to learn, even if you are buying some software and you're throwing some training at the team and say have at it. There's still lots of ways you can get this wrong.
Yeah, well, that's a theme of enforcement notices, whether it's for MiFID transaction reporting, MAR uh, systems, surveillance systems. There are a couple of those on the FCA website that talk about, well, you set up this system, you didn't turn it on, you didn't bother to calibrate it, you just used your off the shelf settings. What I hear a lot is that even though market abuse regulation was supposed to be applied in 2016, is that MiFID was going on at the same time, and now Brexit, and people haven't really been thinking about it the way they ought to be. Uh, it's not a good picture. And
Alan, I guess, would you agree? I mean, that there is something there about the way people adapt these controls that tends to be a bit rushed, and it takes them a second generation to come back at it and try to do RegTech right.
Yes, it's an interesting point, isn't it? Because what you're saying there ultimately is they were trying to do the right thing. They were trying to get this solution done and just didn't maybe have the know-how or the experience or the aptitude or the time probably to actually deliver the thing in a way that it was going to work. And oftentimes you're doing a real live test, right? So you're implementing this stuff and you're testing it out in a live environment. So obviously these things are bound to happen, and I think we see that as you describe in the enforcement notices there, that it was an error in implementation rather than someone willfully deciding they weren't going to comply with the rules, which is completely different. So it's frustrating because that your starting point is, okay, here's a piece of legislation, here's a piece of regulatory change. What do we need to do to get this done, to get this complied with? How much time, how much money have we got? And then you adapt the solutions, and then for whatever reason, you don't get a very good outcome. So I think what RegTech is trying to do, that we're trying to move away from having a MiFID come out and therefore you need a MiFID solution, or a MAR come out and you need a MAR solution, or a PSD. It's always hooked on a specific piece of legislative change. And what we're trying to do, and I think what the most sort of ambitious RegTechs are trying to do, is say we are going to move regulatory change management away from this kind of firefighting approach to something that's going to look much less labor intensive and much less risky in terms of getting things right. So I think one of the benefits that the RegTech solutions have brought out is precisely that model, that you're no longer going to have to hire a team of 50 people just to implement a piece of regulation that doesn't get implemented correctly anyway. What we're saying is your RegTech solutions can already cope with these changes that are going to come down the pipe, because we're use case based, we're not particularly legislation based, and those changes over time can therefore be adapted and delivered as part of that process. I think that's probably the biggest single argument for making the move across, so that you are doing the right thing because you want to do the right thing and it's been done correctly, so you don't get hit because you ran out of time or money or whatever the problem was that meant that you couldn't quite deliver.
Yeah, I think you hit on a really interesting point there about use cases, because I've never read a regulation that spells out use cases in level 1 or level 2. Maybe they get to it by the time they're answering Q&As. But when we write the regs, we don't really get what the context is most of the time. And would you agree, Rachel?
Yeah, I mean, just to go back to something that you and I have talked about before, and I think it wraps in this question about, you know, machine readable rules or digitally delivered rules, is the work you've been doing on the EMIR 2.0 with the common domain model and all that good stuff. I mean, it does come down to having some kind of standardized idea of, what all these different products are that we're having to report on, and being able to express that in code to really take a lot of this implementation error out of the mix. People will have something to check their work against, see what's been done right, what the best practice is. And I see, this move to digital rules making that a lot easier. You and I have talked about that a lot, and that's you know, disambiguating the rules, coming, settling on, well, what is, line 5 of Article 22 of whatever mean, coming down, because I think that creates noise in all of these systems too. Is like, well, we thought it was this, and firm B thought it was that. It's really difficult. And Alan was talking about different jurisdictions. They all have different rules. Well, not all of them, but a lot of them have different rules. So, how do you navigate that in a consistent way? And I think that's where the digital rules make a difference. I mean, one thing we've talked about before is tokenizing uh, compliance alongside tokenized assets. So you can put the rule, TJ and I've talked about this before, kind of dropping and dragging rules onto the security itself. If you have these smart contracts that are programmable, then you can, automate a lot of this, hopefully get some real efficiencies and get rid of mistakes. Because I think that's what that's also what it's all about, is getting this done efficiently, saving some money, and not getting it wrong, so you the firm, don't get fined. And the regulator has some data they can use, and at the same time, hopefully you've got some explainability about what your processes were like and how you arrived at this end state. So there's loads to be benefits to be had, but not everybody wants to do some of the heavy lifting conversations, like PJ's been doing around, what is best practice? How do we get this working? How do we agree on rules? How do we work on this together? I think that's another point of this. If you have everybody running around doing these similar tasks in isolation, it makes things a lot harder.
Yeah, so that's the really interesting thing about the inflection point we're at for RegTech. I mean, it literally has been 5 years of doing tech sprints and policy documents and reports and papers and all kinds of secret squirrel exercises. I guess, Alan, thank you for sponsoring this conference. I think it will really help bring the community back together at a really important point for some of these issues that are here and now. Why should people dial into this event to hear about what the role of RegTech is? What are some of the key takeaways from your point of view?
Well, hard to front run the takeaways, but I think what you're your events are always excellent, PJ, by the way. But what you're going to find out, what I've found out attending your events in the past, is really that the digitization piece is the key piece, and the recognition that it's the infrastructure that sits behind that is what's required. And I think you'll experience the people who have the vision to do that at the event, but also the people who are doing it and have done it, even if it's only to a small degree. And what you necessarily won't need to know is, the outcomes of the tech sprints from 5 years ago. I think that we've sort of moved on from that. So what you're going to see also, I think, is a bit of the consolidation and the collaboration between the key players. I'm hoping that will come out very clearly, that we've moved there is no one size fits all approach to RegTech to compliance. There has to be interoperability, and you're going to highlight, hopefully you're going to throw some very nice spotlights on who is doing what in what space, because the whole RegTech or rather the whole compliance wheel is massive, right? So there's all sorts of elements to it, depending on what you're most interested in. KYC on the blockchain or embedded compliance from an implementation point of view are two ends of the spectrum there, and there's loads in between. But I think what I would want to get to a point of my contributions would be that anyone attending the event is using this now as a springboard to be able to go back and understand what it is that they're able to do, and be inspired by what they hear at the event, so that they can get it done better, faster, cheaper. They know what it is, they know how to apply it, And if nothing else, it gives you a bit of FOMO, doesn't it, that someone else is doing it, and that's probably one of your rivals, so you better get on with it.
Excellent. Well, nothing like fear of missing out to get people to an event. Thank you. Rachel, same question, closing statement, please.
I think the interoperability point is a good one that Alan makes. That things are going to have to work together. And I think that's one of the things that blockchain DLT systems promises. But in terms of the conference, I'm really hoping to hear more about how different firms envision systems and controls of new assets, what kind of ideas they have, how they envision, for example, market abuse surveillance in a meaningful way, instead of just saying, oh, we're going to do some AI. I'd like to hear some details about how what kind of data they're going to be training the AI on, and what kind of patterns they think that they're going to be looking for. Like I was saying before, what is anomalous trading activity in cryptocurrencies? It all seems pretty anomalous to me. And likewise, what everybody thinks that digital assets are, the next big thing. They all say we expect this to happen. It's obviously a lot different than cryptocurrencies, but what does that mean from a compliance point of view? And like you were saying, you can't just import one set of technology to solve problems on this new technology. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's going to behave, all the assets in trading is going to behave the same way. I doubt it. But one of the things that I've been reading about is fractional trading. A lot of these stocks are these tokenized equities are actually derivatives. They're kind of a synthetic exposure to an asset. How do you deal with cross exchange activity, these kinds of things? So if you're on, I don't know what these exchanges are, but if you're on like Kraken doing something, and then you're on Coinbase, do we have data that is able to surveil both of those at the same time? I think there's a lot of very fundamental questions that need to be asked, and people need to be talking about and having some meaningful conversations and thoughtful solutions to. Otherwise, these new platforms might attract bad actors, because they'll know, like, oh, that exchange that's doing whatever, their surveillance is terrible. We can do whatever we want there. I mean, it's just like already criminals know that certain exchanges and wallets are really easy to hack, so they just go in and steal stuff. So I think that's another thing I should have mentioned. Cybersecurity is going to be massive. I mean, if you're holding your Apple tokens in some kind of online wallet and somebody comes and steals it, that's going to be pretty annoying.
Yeah, and I think to me, what you both highlighted is that people need a way to rationalize all the different potential risks right now and where the business opportunities actually are. So if you're sitting in compliance, your business rocks in and says, hey, I've thought about these great new digital asset products. How do I just tweak the current control environment? You better know what the right questions are to ask. You better start thinking quickly about, well, if I'm the person that's put my name on the fact that this all works, what is it I have to worry about now in terms of thinking through a better, more digital way of looking at these controls that I can maintain? And that I think 10 years ago, the RegTech conversation was, how do we implement MiFID II? how are we going to implement MiFID 2? Right now, it's so far beyond that, it's not even funny. We have so many balls up in the air. Everything's changing. How do you lock it down? Start thinking about the way you manage that change as part of business as usual, so that when the regulators finally get ready to change the rules again, which they are, or getting there, it's not going to be such a shock, because you're not going to have enough time to make some of these changes. We never do, but at least you can get out in front. And that's the great bit about bringing the regulators, regulated, and the suppliers all in the same room. Everyone's got that slightly different perspective. So I'm really looking forward to hearing more from you guys on the 23rd of June. Please look for the link. Will be in the description of this podcast, and it'll also be out there on our JWG website. So without further ado, thank you very, very much, Alan and Rachel, and we look forward to talking again soon.
You can download the podcast via Spotify, Apple, and Google. But also, I'd encourage people to come to the JWG website, which, as hopefully you will know, is jwg-it.eu. Go to the Intelligence Hub and create your bespoke library. This is RegCast.
Shining a light on challenges and opportunities for digital compliance.